One of the areas in which North Americans typically are ill-prepared to handle conflict is in the area of mediation. In the case studies for this class, finding mediators is always a helpful thing to do. But there are qualifications. How does the mediator work? These are things we need to look at. Because if we just think of mediator, we think, well, just bring someone in to mediate. However, the mediator has to be trusted by both sides. If one side brings in their favorite mediator, how likely is that person going to be able to do a good job on behalf of both sides? Even if they say they're completely neutral, people will read into whatever they decide. This mediator needs to have appropriate social skills. Usually it means they're more mature, and that's the next one, wisdom and status. Often the best mediators in cultures that use them extensively are older people. They can be older men or older women. Unfortunately, rarely in those situations will an older woman be brought in to dispute a fight with men unless she's seen to have a connection with the spirit world that gives her a particular voice that can speak into a situation, whereas older men might be brought in to deal with the situation of older women because often there is not gender role equality in societies like this. And the mediator must be neutral, must be able to maintain a neutrality. What are the situations where you're trade, you're bargaining, you reach an impasse? We think of arbitration in the United States as a legal framework for someone coming in as an outsider who's supposed to be neutral, and that person will arbitrate and they will make a decision, and beforehand both sides agree to do whatever the arbitrator has said will be done. Marriage, contracts and contract disputes, and other types of disputes. A situation, Wycliffe Bible Translators was facing accusations of changing Bible translations over the term Son of God. They were, in some cases, translations were changing Son into a non-familial term, a non-family term, Messiah of God, Heavenly One from God. You get different translations like this. And this was discovered, and it was discovered in places, and again, I want to be very careful how I say this. It wasn't Wycliffe per se. In some cases, Wycliffe was involved. In other cases, it was other agencies translating. In some cases, it was wildcat translators. They were just individuals who were doing this on their own. But because in the North American church setting, anyone who knows translation, they immediately think Wycliffe. So Wycliffe becomes a lightning rod then when people are unhappy with this translation practice and accusations started flying. I don't know, I've heard on a regular basis from Wycliffe missionaries saying they don't know a single missionary who was not impacted in this in some way, shape, or form. Denominations pulled away support and missionaries who were working with Wycliffe projects. And Wycliffe didn't know how to handle this, so they finally asked the World Evangelical Alliance, would you come in and mediate on our behalf? And what we want you to do is establish a panel. This panel will make a decision focusing on a document that we have put together on best practices in translation for this specific issue, and we agree to follow whatever the organization is, whatever this group agrees to do. So World Evangelical Alliance called for nominations. They got a panel together, and it was 12 people. There were 84 nominees, and they invited 24 of them to join the panel. 12 of them said yes. They got together in Toronto first, and they did work in between and got together in Istanbul. I was one of the members of the panel, and as we met in Istanbul, we spent an entire week just focusing on this statement. Is this right? Is this wrong? What do we do with this? How do we handle this? What suggestions do we make? How do we help Wycliffe move on? And we eventually framed a report, and it went public, and Wycliffe agreed in public to follow it. And one of the denominations that had broken off relationships restored relationships with them. We began the process of establishing trust, but the World Evangelical Alliance was a trusted group, and this was not an individual, but this was a group of people brought in to serve as mediators between Wycliffe and the general public. the American church public more than anything. This was not a controversy anywhere else in the world. It was only a controversy in the United States. I've talked with European friends, African Asians. To the extent they may have been involved in those translations, it was a project that was important to them. But anyway, this decision was made, and now I'm part of a follow-up group that's auditing Wycliffe to make sure they're doing what they said they would. Part of that is to give them a public frame of reference for being able to say, yes, we are doing it. And how do you know? We've got an outside group that's looking at our work right now. So we met in Oxford last December, and Wycliffe had an 80-page document on how to do what we had recommended. And we looked at that and approved it and made some recommendations for change. And then they had us 3 case studies to look at and determine whether these were in compliance with them. 2 of them were and 1 was not. And we reported that to them, and then we meet in about 3 weeks in Charlotte. And in this meeting, we're finalizing our approval of the 85-page document or making more recommendations. I'm sure they're going to bring us more case studies to look at because they want to do it right. But this external group is serving as a mediator rather than an individual mediator. It's an external mediator. We have a German, 2 Egyptians, 2 Americans, and a British person. We have an Islamicist, 2 Arab speakers, a linguist, historical theologian who is aware of divine familial terminology as part of his studies, and I serve as a missiologist, but mine was more the process. How do we help Wycliffe regain trust in his broken relationship with its various publics? So again, this was a situation, the qualification trusted by both sides. Well, some bloggers, the day we presented our paper, said it was a whitewash. They were going to be unhappy whatever we did. Others were saying, no, this was a very helpful step. And by and large, that's been the reaction. More recently, we've been getting some people who've been unhappy with the decision that was made, and they're starting to speak out. So we're starting to get new voices, and I'm making sure their voices are brought into the discussion on the panel side to make sure we know what it is that we're looking at and how we're being criticized for the decisions we made. Then the type of roles mediators can play. They can oversee arguments. I've seen a dispute in an African setting where both disputants were in the same room, and the mediator would go to one, and the one who would harangue the other and talk about what a bad person the other was, and the mediator would go and talk to the other and translate what was said into milder language, even though both heard everything that was said, and hear the response to this one and go back, and they would go back and forth until the dispute was involved. That's not an observer, that's more of a referee going back and forth. A chair is one who moderates a discussion and works things through. This committee has a chairperson. I'm the co-chair of the committee, but the actual chair of the committee, he does not have a vote. He's the former president of Gordon Conwell College, and he calls together the committees, and he helps make sure the discussion goes along without forcing us to do one thing or another. He has not ever told us what his opinion is. He's just acknowledged our work and made sure that our work is going forward. So even we have someone who serves in that type of capacity. A prompter is one who makes sure both sides are listening to each other and hearing to each other. And the arbiter judge role is one who simply listens and then makes a decision based on the evidence. But a lot of times, those of us from cultures which don't have mediatorial frameworks don't know how the mediation game is played. And it's off of our mental map, and often we figure we have to do things right. One of the things is you read, say, Dwayne Elmer's book on cross-cultural conflict, or Marvin Meyer's book on, Sherwood Lingenfelter's book on ministering cross-culturally. You will see at times you can go directly to someone and say something, but what that does is make them lose so much face that if you simply talk to the right person, that person will represent you to the person you have the immediate dispute with. Elmer tells a story of a family that recently moved into a Muslim setting, and the speakers of the minaret were facing their house exactly, and so the 5 a.m. call to prayer was waking up their children and scaring them, and they didn't know what to do. And the person who was a guard for their house, so a low-status person, asked them, what's your problem? He said, our children are having a hard time to sleep, they're scared. And the guard said, okay. The next day, the speakers were turning in a different direction. They didn't try and go directly to the mosque, but they spoke to a local person who was sensitive to their needs and who was able to represent their needs to others who were willing to listen and help them out. They were strangers, but instead of making a hue and cry in public about it, they simply told one person. That person was able to mediate on their behalf.